Today on Locked On Phoenix Suns, Kevin Durant has dazzled us with moment after moment. The Suns are rolling. He has to be the favorite for MVP, right? Let's go.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into Locked On Suns. I'm Brendon, Kleen, a staff writer at Awful Announcing and a credentialed Suns media member. Thank you for making Locked On Suns your first listen to kick off your Friday and close out the week here on the show. Don't forget, Locked On Suns is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. So click that follow or subscribe button right down below and do what thousands of other Suns fans have already done. Become an everydayer and get locked onto the Phoenix Suns right here each and every day. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Download the app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA to win $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. Joining me as always from the wonderful West Valley, a fellow Suns credentialed media member. How are we feeling on this Friday, Ben Garcia?
It's so good. The Suns are 6-1, 7-1, atop the Western Conference. Everything is good over here. Everything is so good in Suns land. We keep stacking wins, and the show keeps growing, which is even more fun.
Before I forget, please sign up for the newsletter. We got some numbers. We're 10 away from a big benchmark. I'm not going to lie, Ben. We're way behind the Lakers. We're way behind the Mavs. We're way behind the Kings. All these teams we hate. We got to be competitive here. Show people that this is a fan base that actually has something to say. And you get some writing every day. You get to stay up to date with the show. It's all right there. Please just hit follow or hit subscribe. The link is in the show description.
I feel like yesterday we talked about making stickers. I feel like if people come and see us in public and come say hello, and they show us that they are subscribed to the newsletter, then they get a sticker. And then only do they get... And they only then get
we have a step to take first, which is to actually make.
You have to get the stickers. Yeah. And if they don't, we publicly shame them.
Okay. And if we don't have the stickers in a timely fashion, then they can publicly shame us. I think that's basically
some of them already do that. Some of them already do that.
That's true. Okay. Kevin Durant, Ben, is 6th in MVP odds over at FanDuel, plus 1,900. He is kind of a distant 6th, I would say. The real top 4 right now, as far as the betting odds do go, is SGA, Luka, Jokic, Tatum, and then Ant is just ahead of KD. Probably still a little of a preseason rub on him, even though the Wolves are off to a up and down start, and then KD is right there at number 6. And just to read Durant's numbers so far, 27.8 points per game, 7 rebounds, just over 3 assists, and almost a block and a half. He is shooting 55% from the field, 42% from 3, 81% from the free throw line, getting to the line more, taking more threes, and you add in some big defensive games, some clutch performance. Are the odds too high on him, too low on him? Should he just be the favorite? What are we looking at? KD MVP.
Yeah, first there's the argument of like Kevin Durant should be the MVP or should not be. But then at first the argument, like there's the FanDuel. I don't know who's not paying attention when they make these odds, whoever it is. And at this point, it's FanDuel. But why would you have Kevin Durant so far back? Like so much of this award as well is narrative driven. And like, I don't think Derrick Rose should have won an MVP years ago. I think he stole that from LeBron James. There's an argument that people make. Steve Nash, should he have won the MVP over Kobe Bryant? I think he should have. Russell Westbrook, we gave him an MVP for averaging a triple-double, and he wasn't even that efficient that year. Some of it is just narrative driven, and that narrative then was Kevin Durant left Russell Westbrook. Let's give him something. Joel Embiid got one because he publicly campaigned for it like a presidential candidate. Kevin Durant fits the narrative of a guy that would get the MVP at 37 years young, carrying a team. And then you had mentioned the statistics as well. The only thing that has taken a step back, like noticeably, is his free throw shooting, which I've noticed that just by watching the games with Kevin Durant. But everything else, the guy is doing more than the other candidates are doing with. Like, if we held the rosters up at this point, like Kevin Durant is more valuable to the Suns than I think Luka Doncic is at this point, or Jason Tatum is at this point.
Yeah, I think that's going to maybe be, first of all, I think the best case for him, let me start there so I don't start with the negative.
Yeah.
The case for KD as MVP is going to be, because you mentioned Russ, a lot of the case that triple-double year was also the clutch moments. In addition to the narrative, in addition to the triple-double, he had legitimately like a half dozen buzzer-beating game winners that season that just, you look at that and you're like, as almost concretely as possible, they don't win without that. Like, that's about as like direct as it can get. And if KD keeps doing that, the dude already has like a couple of those this season. And if he adds more, then especially later in the season when it's fresher in voters' minds, and he has these counting stats and the team is winning, he's going to have a very, very good case. So let me just get that out of the way. I think, though, the reason we have seen the same kinds of players win it lately is there's more teams that just run stuff through one guy than ever before.
So usage.
Yeah, not just usage rate or like a stat, but you watch the Mavs, everything they do on offense is related to what Luka does for them. There's no game that he's not going to have his fingerprints everywhere, whereas because the Suns play a little bit more balanced, because they have multiple other stars on the team, everything else, KD's just never going to quite be able to stack up the counting stats, the usage like you said, the overall impact the way that for sure Shea, Luka, and Jokic are. The other guys I think are more like KD, but those three, it's going to be hard to crack through that.
Yeah, that drives me a little insane because every year we change the bleeping criteria for what the MVP should have been. We broke the mold when Russell Westbrook was like the 6th seed and won MVP for them. But like for the longest time, it was
Jokic
the best
like a
player.
5 or 6 seed once.
I think that was the year that the Suns swept him. And so that would have made them, I think, a 6 seed. I think 5 seed. They beat the Trailblazers. But either way, I get so annoyed with the changing narratives. And I'm not blaming you with this because it used to be best player on the best team. Right now, you can make the argument, okay, that's Donovan Mitchell with the Cavs because they're 9-0 or whatever it looks like at that end. Darius Garland, I'm not really getting into the weeds of that. But it used to be best player on the best team. And if I'm just eyeballing it, if I'm doing a power rankings, I do think the Suns are the best team in the NBA right now, given the schedule, given the track record, and not to mention, you said it as well. How many clutch buckets already through the start of the season does Kevin Durant have? And I didn't think we'd be having this conversation. The Suns don't win 4 games on the season, 5 games on the season without Kevin Durant. That's valuable to me. I get so annoyed with the ball dominance thing because the usage rates, the James Hardens, the Luka Doncic's of the world, the Nikola Jokic. I'd be like,
well, what's your case against it then, right? Because I think it's kind of like the baseballification of the MVP in the NBA, right? It's guys like Mike Trout being able to win it when their teams are garbage because we can just quantify things at such a microscopic level that it's hard to argue if you're just saying value, if you're just saying impact. Those guys have it because they're just their fingerprints are everywhere and they're driving the most important thing at a high level, which is scoring in basketball. And so then you just sort of calculate it out and it's difficult. There might be some narratives and some differences here and there between the top 3 candidates, but you're not going to have some wild card guy break through because we just kind of know the math at this point and we know what matters in basketball. So what else should it look like? What else could it look like?
I don't think Kevin Durant should be looked down upon when it comes to MVP voting because he has other stars on his team. And it really is just star at this point. I don't think Bradley Beal still constitutes as being a star. He's a high-level superstar role player. Jason Tatum, we want to talk about ball usage rate. They could have started a starting 5 of the Celtics versus the world in the Olympics, and they would have won. That's how good that team is. Luka Doncic, Kyrie Irving, PJ Washington.
Yeah, but I think Tatum only has one other guy you would consider a star, right?
Jaylen Brown, I mean, was the MVP of last year.
Yeah,
and
that's what I'm talking about.
of the
But then he would be
Eastern
the
Conference
book,
Finals.
And then what?
I mean, Drew Holiday's got 2 titles at this point. Kristaps Porzingis was.
Yeah, they're an enormously talented roster. I hear your point, but
they are more. I mean, come on. Objectively, we could even go just his stats by stats. Those guys are more talented than the guys the Suns have. Drew Holiday's more talented than Tyus Jones.
Yeah,
Kristaps
I think
Porzingis
KD's
is
a better
over
candidate
Nurkic.
than Tatum probably right
but
now.
But that's one of the guys that you. But that's one of the guys right now that he's fighting up against.
Yeah.
Luka Doncic, it's a better argument. Nikola Jokic, I think, is a really good argument, but it just drives me a little crazy when we look down upon Kevin Durant because he has one other star player on his team and a better collection of talent this year. Because what was the argument last year? Because he had similar numbers and they weren't winning games.
Yeah. I think it's less that he has other talent and more just that responsibility and usage thing. I think that's really what is going to be working against him and worked against Book in 2022. And, any kind of the reason Tatum hasn't won one, like you just said, even though he's kind of been in the mix from time to time. I think that's what it is. When you just watch Denver, Oklahoma City, and Dallas, the amount that runs through those three teams' best players is just hard to compete with. It really is. Let me ask you one last question on this topic, though, because I think we're on the same page mostly. He's going to continue to be a factor, especially if they keep winning, and he's been awesome, and the clutch stuff will help. But you mentioned narrative in terms of just like being the best team, but what about narrative just in terms of like the Kevin Durant narrative? Do you think people are going to be more or less likely to vote for him than some of these other guys just based on kind of the story of it?
Oh,
Older
man, that's
guy,
a really good question.
won already,
Really
not super always the most liked guy, but obviously has tons of diehard fans for himself.
Well, I think that the voters are always trying to get a narrative behind. And I'd mentioned that before. Derrick Rose, the young guy, I think he's the youngest MVP ever, beats out LeBron James, which was ridiculous, and I'll stand by that. Russell Westbrook, Kevin Durant broke up with him. He wasn't very efficient, but there wasn't really anyone else on that team. It was kind of like the breakup thing. He wins the MVP. I do think Kevin Durant has the best narrative right now, and that is so stupid that that's a thing, but it really is a thing when it comes to the MVP ladder. Joel Embiid was that. He literally campaigned for it during the regular season. KD being the 37-year-old and kind of looked upon his legacy as, is it kind of teetering on the brink of collapse, given the fact that the Nets didn't work out, the Suns could maybe not work out. It all goes as the Suns goes in that aspect. If they're a first or a second seed, he's going to have a real case because he has that older guy. I think he might be the oldest MVP to win it at that point. So for me, he's got the narrative in the bag. What I would ask you just really quickly is, because we're going to have to wrap this up in a second here, but what's the percentage chance he wins it? What do you think it is right now?
Well, I'll just comment on the narrative. And you mentioned the Suns being the best team. I think the Thunder are still the best team so far, and I think that they have the narrative on their side. I think that you saw a lot of backlash last year, and a lot of the ex-players when Jokic got it were of the opinion that it should have been Shea's, and I think that will continue, and they're gonna be right neck and neck with the Suns all season, I think. So he's younger, it's kind of his time, so to speak. That team has been building, and he's been improving year by year. That's going to be hard to crack. So I think he would still be my favorite. I said that before the season. I would give KD a 15% chance.
That's fair. I'd probably give it right around there too. There's just too much basketball to be played to give a specific time frame of what it should be. But I am surprised that we're having this conversation so early. I didn't expect him to be this great, this fast.
Says a lot about the start that he's had, and the Suns have been very, very good so far. Some of the advanced stats are a little weird on him too in terms of on-off, so that's going to be one to look at. Got a lot of basketball to play, but that is in there as well. Let's jump to Ryan Dunn, who unfortunately we did get an update on, and it wasn't great. What does that mean for him? What does that mean for the Suns? Next. First, today's show is brought to you by the PrizePicks app, the best place to play daily fantasy sports, because they basically fixed daily fantasy sports. That's the bottom line here. I hated playing all sorts of old games, whether that was a pool, whether that was a league, whether that was head-to-head or anything else. You just feel like you're getting sharked every day. You feel like I'm just throwing my money away. This isn't fun. This isn't competitive. I'm screwed. I hate this. PrizePicks said, well, you're not going to hate this. You're actually going to love it, and it's going to be a lot more fun because it's just you versus the PrizePicks player projections. Basically, you versus your own brain. If you have a great idea, if you understand sports, if you know what you're talking about, and you can find the projections that they have wrong, that's going to be all that is standing in the way of you versus a sweet, sweet win. So download the app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA when you do to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the PrizePicks app, use the code LOCKEDONNBA, and get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks. Run your game. Today's show also is brought to you by the FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel because right now new customers bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. We were already talking about the MVP odds, KD's plus 1900, but look, you're not going to win that bet or lose it anytime soon, so you want to take advantage, get those bonus bets rolling in. The Suns are 3.5-point underdogs on Friday night in Dallas. They are plus 138 to win the game. I also think the 231.5 over-under is interesting. The Suns have broken that many times already this season, and the Mavs are a high-scoring team, even with some of their absences. Wherever you want to go, wherever you want to look, get that first win and get to work with $150 in bonus bets, all at FanDuel.com. All right, Ben, let's keep it rolling. So Ryan Dunn did travel to Dallas, but he is doubtful for Friday night's game against the Mavericks with a left ankle sprain, as we talked about a little bit last night. What's your reaction to the injury for a dude we just haven't been able to say enough good things about through the first 8 games of the year?
Thank God it's just an ankle injury because you never know. It could have been a calf. And if it was a calf, then we're talking about a month. But if it's an ankle injury, I think he's 22 years old. The guy will be back in a week. He'll be itching to come back in a week. And it kind of sucks because I really wanted to see him match up again with Luka Doncic. That is, I think, a more favorable matchup than what we have with other guys. And it's like cheap fouls that you get with Luka. If Ryan Dunn gets a couple, it's okay because you can throw KD at him. I don't like the idea of having to throw Kevin Durant at him and then he potentially gets in foul trouble. Like, it just spews some irritants for everything, but it's an ankle injury. Not that big of a deal. He'll be back in a week. It does just kind of suck because I did want to see him play Luka Doncic. What about you?
Definitely not the end of the world. I think that they will probably be fairly patient because they do have other options, which I want to talk about in a moment. The one thing that I will say that I just hope doesn't happen as a result of this, and especially if he can just kind of come back sooner than later, it probably won't happen. But the last 2 games before this, his whole thing with the jumper and the offensive game since the draft has been just keep basically wiping my brain, no thinking, chuck shots, and make as many as I can and block out the noise, right? And he was starting to hesitate a little bit. He was starting to hesitate. Now, on the Miami game, he made both of his threes before he did get hurt, so maybe I'm just reading too much into that, and he was actually right back to getting out of the slump, and it wouldn't have been a thing if he hadn't gotten hurt. But I just don't want this to be something where he's on the bench, he has time to think, he's having to work his way back, he's watching other guys play well while he's out, and then it starts to be a slight confidence hit. But even as I'm saying that, Ben, I'm thinking back to how many moments we've watched this dude flex and scream and be one of the biggest competitors on this team, and I'm like, okay, I'm going crazy convincing myself that he's going to ever lack confidence.
Yeah, just to quickly add, I've noticed that as well with his shooting ability. I think at times he can be a little hesitant, which I just think gets in his head. I think, even being more specific, that first 3 matters so much for Ryan Dunn. We know almost immediately which guy we're going to get. If it clinks off the backboard or the back iron, I guess I should say, or if he swishes it, like he just feels like he has more confidence and he feels like he has the green light. So I would agree with you on that. I do think I've seen a little bit of hesitancy, but I don't think it's at all anything to worry about. He has got so many good guys. Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, Bradley Beal, Yusuf Nurkic, Tyus Jones, vets to tell him, hey man, you don't have to do everything. Just be the lockdown defender and hit open threes. Like, we don't need to hit you to contested things. And I think that's a big deal too.
It's one of the weird things about being more of a perimeter player on a good team as a young guy is almost all of your shots are threes, right? Like if it's Book and he had a cold streak from 3, we go, get to the line, get an easy one. There's no such thing as that for Ryan Dunn, right? Every shot he takes is basically going to be a 3 or a transition dunk. And that's about it. Or maybe a putback if he can get into the lane on a miss and
he's not going to have the
lucky
opportunity
with a couple. And so that's the thing where the rhythm and the confidence just do matter so much. But In terms of what we're going to see in the meantime, let's say he misses 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games, whatever it might be. Monte Morris, Oso Ighodaro had already kind of gone to the bench. We haven't seen Josh Okogie at all. He is back active and healthy, which people might have missed because he just wasn't in the rotation anyway.
I missed.
And then Bol, not really been a factor. That's probably the extent of who I think is kind of in the mix to maybe see more opportunity here. I'm not positive it's just going to be one guy. Okay, he's just going to take Dunn's minutes and Dunn's role, and that's what it is. But what are you expecting as far as guys we could get a longer look at in the meantime while Dunn heals up?
I think it's Josh Okogie. I think that's the most obvious add because he is probably the Suns' second best defender now behind Ryan Dunn. But God, the guy can't shoot a lick. God, he can't shoot a lick. So, like, I'm going to say it's definitely going to be Josh Okogie, but I hope it's Oso Ighodaro. I don't even know how that would really fit, per se, but at least he's bigger, and I trust his defense more because he's bigger, not that he's exactly a better defender. And maybe
and
you
he
can
can't
just
guard the
add
same
some
kinds
confidence.
of guys, right? That's the tough thing.
Neither can Jo though. Like he's more of just a nuisance. He's only 6'2". Like him going up against Luka Doncic isn't necessarily scaring Luka. So I think just throwing in I hope it's Oso, not because I think it's going to be awesome, but because I think more experience. Let's see what else he can do. Like I hope it's him. I've seen the Josh Okogie thing. I don't really want to go back to that well, but what about you?
I'll go a little bit of a different way. I think because of the way that O'Neal has defended, because of the way that Beal has defended, and the fact that, last year, Grayson was oftentimes getting these assignments in some games. I mean, there was a game where the Suns beat Dallas where Grayson had the primary matchup guarding Luka. And so between the three of them and the fact that it is just a short-term injury, I wonder if we don't see a look. I think Oso could be in the mix, but I think Bol could as well, to be honest with you. I know you're not the biggest fan and we debate on him sometimes, but now's kind of the time. If you want to see what he has at all, this is the moment to do it, where just throw him out there in some advantageous situations where he doesn't have to, be overexposed and see what he has and see if he can, get it going on offense and that type of thing. And then at least you give him the shot. And that way, if he does end up getting benched, at least you tried it. Right. So
I'd rather Bol. I'd rather Bol over Jo. I've just seen the Josh Okogie experience.
Yeah,
I've got way too many bad experiences with Josh Okogie breaking a three in the corner. But at least he can defend, and at least he is a vet. Like there is that, but I'd rather see the Bol experience than if I got to watch
Okogie
Josh
has never
Okogie.
felt like a Mike Budenholzer player to me.
No.
I think they obviously re-signed him for trade purposes and everything else. We've talked about that, and we'll continue to talk about that. But as far as an on-court fit, I don't think Okogie really makes a lot of sense for how Mike Budenholzer wants to play, and even the defensive limitations that you mentioned, being a little bit of a smaller player. So we'll see what they do in the meantime. They're not going to lose games because Ryan Dunn is not out there. He was hit or miss in terms of how many minutes he was getting anyway, but they will be without him for the foreseeable future. Let's close out with a Western Conference check-in as the Suns stare down a Dallas, Sacramento again, Oklahoma City, Minnesota, all in the near future. Coming up next. First, today's show is brought to you by SKIMS. We all wear underwear every day, but many of us, switched it up in a while. We don't think about it. We just kind of buy the same thing. We know that's cheap or I know I like it, whatever. It's at the store I always go to. But SKIMS is changing up the game, and they're worth switching it up for. The number one thing that I will say about SKIMS is that they are soft as you know what. Legitimately the softest thing I've ever worn, to the point where, in a good way, you don't notice it. I think noticing underwear is probably the worst thing, because then that probably means it's itchy or it doesn't fit or it's tight or it's something else, and that's not what you want to be dealing with. So soft, out of mind, comfy, that's the main appeal here. They sent us 2 pairs. I love mine. They're each a little different. One's a little bigger, one's a little smaller, different colors. I love them both. They're in the mix. I honestly, when they come up in the pile, I'm like, perfect. That's a little special treat for the day. So try it out. think about switching it up. You won't regret it. Shop Skims Men at skims.com. Let them know we sent you by going to the survey after you place your order and selecting podcast in the drop-down menu that comes after your order. So make that order, buy what you want, and click podcast in the survey afterward to let them know we sent you. And if you're looking for the perfect gift for the whole family, Skims just launched their biggest holiday shop ever, also available at skims.com. Closing out the show, Ben. Okay, so
I'm sorry, we're gonna go right past the fact that you said that, it's like an extra special treat for the day when those underwear come up.
I mean, you haven't gotten your sample yet, man.
I'm sure I know that they're
out.
amazing, but they must be a whole nother brand of amazing if you're looking at them.
You'll get your box whenever they do another, little sample for everybody, and then there'll be some day where we sit down to record and you'll be feeling comfortable, and then I'll be telling you I told you so.
Also, there was a comment on YouTube that wanted to know when we were going to get the Locked On Suns underwear calendar shoot. So that was a
TBD. I got to talk to Skims about that. I got to get branded purple with the logo.
Sorry, that is so funny. Anyways, the closeout, Brendon, the closeout.
The closeout. Well, I only do that for the post-game shows. That's the closeout. That's the closeout. This is just the third segment of a regular show. Come on. You got to learn the difference here. As you mentioned, we were talking about MVP. The Suns are sitting atop the West right now. They are tied with the Thunder and the Warriors. Those two teams in particular, their point differential is absolutely out of this world. Both of those teams are outscoring their opponents by an average of 15-plus points, which is just like filthy way to start the season. The Suns are actually, in terms of point differential, they're actually because they played all these close games, obviously you can pat them on the back for the clutch wins, but they're 7th, 8th, I think, when it comes to
I thought it was 7th.
Point differential. They're basically tied with Minnesota. So how are we feeling about the standings? You thought this first 10 games was going to be a nightmare, and here they are coming out of it looking pretty good. Even if they lost the next two, 7-3 is a pretty good case scenario here.
Yeah, I was just hoping that they would go 6-4, and I thought everyone would be sounding the alarm of that this team has got so many issues going with it. But now they're 7-1, and fans and media are nitpicking because they're barely winning games. Look at the teams that they're playing. They're playing good teams. Every team they've played so far was a playoff team last year, and they're beating them close. Yes, blowouts are fun, but this team still hasn't put together a full 4 quarters of basketball. They've kind of messed around depending on the opponent. They kind of struggled to come out with some fire. The second half, they make adjustments and they kick the tar out of teams. 7-1 is an amazing place for them to be. And we can kind of get into the fact that also, like I mentioned this a little bit yesterday, they're 7-1. They have an injury and there's no freakouts. And it's like Kevin Durant turns an ankle 2 weeks. They're 7-1. You have that buffer where other teams don't have that yet. And it's a privilege to have that early in the season. I feel great. I know the point differential is 7th, but I don't really care how you win. I just care that you win. Would I like for them to be a little bit more convincing against the Blazers? Sure. They fell asleep in that game. I've watched every game. I know what happens. So I feel so good. I feel so good where they're at.
That's the only one where you would look at it and say, like, it should have been a blowout. Other than that, they've played some good teams. Like, they're going to play close games against good teams. I don't know what you want really there. And so, but yeah, at a certain point, it's like, get a blowout win against the Jazz on next Tuesday, right? Like, start to stack up some wins. They play the Nets the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. Like, kill them, right? Like, so we'll monitor that as the season goes along. But right now, I just care about wins and losses. And more specifically than that, it's way too early to be really, counting wins and the standings and everything else. But if they could beat Dallas on Friday and have 2 in the bag against that team to start the season, that's going to matter. That's a team that you're going to be neck and neck with when it comes to seeding and the standings. And we've seen how tight the West has been for the past several years. Like, these teams are going to be clustered all within a few wins of each other. And so being able to beat a top West team twice early before any injuries or any messiness happens, That's pretty big. So those things do matter, and they'll have to take care of business against Oklahoma City and Minnesota next week and everything else. But that's definitely on my mind. How far do the Suns have to get? How far do we need to get into the season before you actually start feeling like, okay, like they're really in play for the 1 seed?
25 games. 25 games. That has always been my benchmark of the have and have nots. I need to see a little over a quarter of the season, about a third of the season, to know what this team is. I kind of use that same thing for baseball too, but it's easy for a team like the Warriors right now are 7-1 or something insane. Do I buy the Warriors? I don't. They did the same thing last year. We'll see how it goes later on in the season. The Suns, because it's been such a complete 180, I do kind of buy it, but I do need to see 25 games of mostly healthy basketball and a record of, I don't know, 18 and whatever, 4, whatever my math is there, 18 and 5 or whatever it is. If they have that kind of record through 25 games of the season, like, yeah, that is a team that I believe can continue to be awesome for the rest of the year. And again, it just builds in that extra comfort for injuries. What about you? Do you have a certain benchmark like I do?
I don't really. I feel like I kind of think of it as like, what do the standings look like at Christmas? Which is probably about the same thing as if I were to count up the games. Like, we might be basically on the same target there.
Right.
But also, I mean, I just coincidentally, I definitely didn't, look at this ahead of time or anything. But the Suns around that point in time, they have at Denver 2 days before Christmas. They're home against Denver on Christmas. Dallas at home 2 days after. Golden State, Memphis. So, like, it just so happens that stretch is also going to be pretty informative in terms of can they beat those teams and what do the standings look like around that time, having to go up against so many Western Conference teams. So that's probably where I'll start to look at it. They play a bunch of Eastern Conference teams after that they can probably beat up on and kind of pad their record against, and that might kind of lie to us a little bit. So maybe it's actually good to check on it before then too, but that's where I'm at. That's usually where I look at. But you mentioned missing people. Like, they've also missed Beal already a couple times.
They did miss Beal. But they had Ryan Dunn for that.
Yeah. So
team's deep, man. Team's deep. So good. This team's so good. Hey, just really quickly, I know you and I kind of talked off air. We are very locked into the Suns. Can you say just this generally? Can you say that there is definitively a team better than the Suns? Like, you put them together and you're like, that team's, you don't even need to think about it. Like, or even like the Thunder. Do you have to be like, okay, Thunder. But is there a team definitively right now, through 8 games this season, you're like, they're better?
It is Oklahoma City, but I want to see it.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not going to definitively say anything until I've seen the Suns actually play those teams, right? Like, that's going to be the ultimate test, obviously.
Is that at home?
So
is Oklahoma City at home?
Next Friday on the road.
You ever been to Oklahoma?
I'm not going, no. Haven't been, not going. Not because I wouldn't love to.
I've been. It's nice. Let's go. Hop on a plane.
Paycom Center or whatever it's called.
I thought it was called Cheapskate Arena or something. Because I used to call it Cheapskate. Oh, I used to call it Cheapskate because it's Oklahoma City.
Let's see. OKC Thunder Arena.
I thought it was
Paycom. I was right. I think you might be thinking of a different one.
No, it definitely used to be that one because I used to call it Cheapskate.
Also, I'm looking at the schedule upcoming, and Monday, November 18th against the Magic, ESPN has that ticket link right there on the page.
Yeah.
$8. So
for the Suns Magic?
At Footprint Center. So people want to go to a Suns game. The Magic are a pretty fun team. I mean, I think Paolo will still be out, but that's a competitive team. You can get in for $8, see an NBA game.
It's hang out with us.
Get a sticker.
Potentially.
Maybe if
you're subscribed to the newsletter. That's
I think the right thing to commit to. By Monday, November 18th, when the Suns get back from their road trip and people can get in the building for $8, we will try to have some stickers. We're giving ourselves 11 days, Ben. I think we can do it.
I will talk to my wife about it as soon as she gets in. She should be home in a second. She could help me out with that.
Sign up for the newsletter. That is a link in the show description below. It literally says sign up for the Locked On Suns daily newsletter. You literally just click that to put your email in. It's that easy. It's free. I don't know if I've said that enough. It is free. It's not paying for anything. You just get info, analysis, and keep up with the show. Better yet, support the show. just by doing that, or you can type in Locked On Daily in your browser, lockedondaily.com, click the Suns link, type your email in there. It's that easy. It really does go a long way, and there's some good content in there. We wouldn't be pushing it and pumping it if it wasn't something that could actually be good for all of you. Hit follow or subscribe if you guys haven't already here on the feed. Become an everydayer, and we'll catch you next week.